Welcome to the Time of the Reason podcast show. We're not looking for ratings. We are not here to support and to create sensationalism. We are not here to entertain. We are here to give due diligence to the pressing human, economic, environmental, political, and social issues that affect humankind. We are here to promote thinking. Now, more than ever, is the time to revive reason. Unless we do so, humankind is riding a one-way runaway train into oblivion. Think about it. We must think. Thank you for listening again to another episode of the Time of the Reason podcast show. Let's get started. Welcome back to another Time of the Reason podcast show conversation. I'm here with Dan Ploger, my cohort, my partner in conversational crime, if you will. We appreciate you visiting us again to hear about relevant things that are happening in the world today, and maybe offer some solutions or a different side or a different view of looking at things. Today we're going to talk about the exchange of people between Hamas and the state of Israel, and we ask the question, are we dealing with the devil? And I'll preface it, then we'll get going. We're not going to waste your time. We're going to stay relevant. A 7-day ceasefire just ended. And during this ceasefire between Hamas, which is hanging out, hiding in Gaza, in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, it was a time to create some negotiations. I guess everybody's heard about what's going on. And 105 Israelis, well, not just Israelis, but 105 hostages and other foreign nationals were released. Now, these were primarily citizens. And of course, in the state of Israel, military service is mandatory. So some of these people either had been in the reserves or were still in the reserves. And so some of them could have been deemed soldiers. But most of these, if not all of these hostages, were taken in a heinous attack on the state of Israel on October 7th. Everybody knows about it. These people were captured, men, women, babies, children, elderly people were taken back into Gaza, spread out throughout the whole strip in bunker type rooms and buildings throughout Gaza. And many of them were actually hidden underneath sites where you wouldn't normally hide hostages, like underneath hospitals and kindergartens and civilian areas, which, we talk about the rules of war, rules of engagement, and it's criminal. You can slice it any way you want it. These are not freedom fighters. These are people who adhere to no articles of war. Civilized people don't hide amongst the population. But anyhow, what's interesting is the 240 Palestinians that were released were either accused of or found guilty of violent crimes, a lot of terrorist acts, a lot of things like that. And so the exchange of prisoners, whether you believe it or want to agree to it or not, if you're open-minded, you can say there's a huge disparity between people that were living their lives absconded, taken into a war area, and then those that were actually doing things that landed them in jail. So again, the Palestinians, Hamas, I'm not going to say the Palestinians, but Hamas, they've been called freedom fighters. And our question is since when do freedom fighters rape and mutilate and torture and take hostage babies and children and the elderly? And it seems very devilish to me. And I don't think, if anybody's being honest, that they can say that these were a fair exchange or that we should even be involved in this. Of course, the mission is to destroy Hamas, which is being funded by Iran. Some people don't want to say it. We'll say it. They're a proxy terrorist organization. The whole world sees it. And if you ever see those videos of the supernova concert, that those people attacked and what they did to those concert goers, that's enough right there to show people what we're up against when it comes to Hamas. These are people that do not value life. They don't value the life of their own kind, their own tribes, their own people. They value nothing but power. So this show is not about me and a narrative. It's about the conversation. Are we dealing with the devil, Dan, when it comes to Hamas?
Well, I think so. I think that, and probably any discussions with Hamas are futile because of the position of the combatants in war. Hamas is out for the total destruction of Israel, and Israel's out for the total destruction of the political party Hamas, which is the political party of the Palestinians. And I don't know how you deal rationally with that situation. It's each side insists on the death of the other, and I don't see there being any path forward when that's the position of the two combatants sitting across the table.
You know, you're a combat veteran yourself. You know, as a young man, found yourself in Southeast Asia amongst the enemy, and we've read about the villages where the Viet Cong hung out, or the NVA, or you know, were the rules of war followed in Vietnam? Did the enemy do some things, or did we do some things, or is that just common in war?
I'm trying to think of, yes. Well, one instance comes to mind, and that's when the then equivalent of IEDs, explosive devices along the road, which included landmines and also munitions just offset from the road. And an anti-tank mine blew up on a school bus that was bringing Vietnamese civilians to our base. And there were 23 killed or something in that order. But that was, you know, that was mining the roads and not being concerned about whether innocent non-combatants would be the recipients of the fury of the weapons. So I guess that I think that Geneva rules of war were probably followed, but there were certainly a lot of casual casualties, and more so than we had hoped for. And so I think that, you know, the rules of war were followed in that there weren't any poison gases that I know of, although there are explosive gases. And I don't know what, you know, what's happening in the tunnels in the Gaza. But I think that pretty much the rules of war were followed. You know, when you're in a death situation where that's your only solution is either your death or the death of your enemy, you're not in a position to negotiate anything. You're just solely in a position to kill your enemy. That's
pretty much the bottom line. So what do you think is we were talking about this the other day, that it was part of the plan, you know, like this woman on this picture behind me, you know, she was one of the hostages that was released, an elderly woman. You know, what's the goal of taking such innocent people as hostages?
to force the Israelis to the negotiating table. That's the intention. The hostage securing was a part of the plan that was devised by Hamas when they invaded Israel, and which is what they did. So this is all part of it. So you gather around a couple hundred uh, hostages that we can use to negotiate to gain advantage in future positions. Um, is that against the rules of war? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, good question. It's interesting because in the last month or so, a little over a month since this all started, actually going on a couple of months, but how, we've had these global protests in support of the Palestinian people, which in essence is really supporting what Hamas did on October 7th. And it's surprising to me that Hamas may have gotten, people say they won the psychological war because of all these protests, but do any of these people protesting understand what a radical Islamic state would look like? That's the part that just blows me away. Like gays for Palestine. Did they realize that they would be beheaded, tortured, put on a bus, shipped away to the desert somewhere, and with a long trench, and probably just gunned down and buried over? Or do these people even realize who they're supporting?
Oh, you're
And if they do, or that, how can you be so stupid?
well, John. I don't have any faith that any college student today is using their mind or anything but a place to hold their head on their shoulders. They none of them are critical thinkers. Nobody, in my mind, could support the actions of Hamas, and uh, I think it's just young students, young people. They aren't really full-fledged people yet, but they're just exercising their brain synapses for hopes that maybe they can use it in the future, but they're not using it now. So also, I have every concern. When we were looking at the border, at Biden's border, when you look at all the people coming in, they look like uh, Arabs that were,
Yeah, you mentioned the scientific method, critical thought. Put two and two together, really.
yeah. So it looks to me like most of the people that were doing the protesting and this big outpouring of support for Palestine is just the result of immature adolescent minds that hadn't quite figured out how to uh, critically evaluate anything.
I heard the other day, and that's a good point. I heard the other day that you keep poking the bear, and it was a black American guy was saying that the bear in America is the Caucasian guy with the flat top haircut that
Yeah,
drives around in a pickup truck, and he was basically saying, how long are the American bears going to allow themselves to be poked at? I mean, I got to say, and I'm 64 years old, but when I see a Palestinian or somebody who I assume is a Palestinian up on a light pole ripping down an American flag to replace it with a Palestinian flag on the streets of New York, I take offense to that. I mean, that's like abusing the rights of the American citizens. And for
yeah,
that to be allowed, if you or me did that, we'd be in jail. And I can't imagine. I mean, how much longer are American people going to witness these things happening, and things that you normally see in third world countries, the abuse of our freedoms and rights by people that aren't even citizens? And
yeah,
and I can tell you, a lot of these people, some may be citizens, and again, it's an assumption, but a lot of them look like they're very well practiced at protest and violent protest and that kind of stuff. All I can say is keep poking the bear, and I think there could be a very bad outcome there. They
yeah.
talk about Islamophobia, but never have I ever seen in my lifetime the level of anti-Semitism that's actually taking place these days in America.
Yeah. And if that's anti-Semitism is considered Islamophobia, then you know there's no moral equivalence, as they say. So yeah, Yeah, poke the bear
I
eventually.
mean, if I was to somehow get into Russia, right, as an American citizen, and I was going to replace the Russian flag on a pole somewhere with the Ukrainian flag,
Yeah,
what do you think would happen to me? You
yeah, yeah.
know,
That's the beauty of the First Amendment, John. And as they say, the First Amendment is not to protect speech that you like; it's to protect speech that you don't like.
absolutely. And so my advice would be to anybody that comes to this country and abuses our culture or
Our freedoms
our freedoms and rights,
to get their point across. So
tread lightly. And this is not to be a threat or anything. It's reality because you and I, I know that you're an engineer. We talk a lot about the second law of thermodynamics in the universe and how entropy works, and which is very close to karma. And all I can say is, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. But there's a lot of people out there, and I hear the grumblings from people on the street. American citizens are really upset that our government is allowing these things to take place in our cities
yeah,
across America. And like you were saying earlier, that colleges are gone. I had an eighth grade biology teacher. I still remember him down in Florida. And I remember when I dissected my first frog, but it wasn't about dissecting frogs. It was about the scientific method, critical thought, asking questions, logic and reason. And I think what the internet has done, this might digress a bit, but I think what that people have taken control of these social media platforms and have used them as massive propaganda tools.
yes,
And it's just come out recently how they silenced a certain portion of the American population when it came to COVID and things like that, by our own government. So I think that it's more than exchanging hostages and bigger than dealing with the devil. I believe that we have a global push by powers that be to take away anybody's freedoms, no matter where they're at. I think this is some kind of big, and this is not even conspiracy. This is only knowing or making comments to what I'm witnessing and having an understanding of history
yeah,
and human behavior. So when the goal of two sides is annihilation, which is really mutual annihilation, nothing can come, nothing good can come out of this. What do you think needs to happen, Dan, to right this ship? And can it be righted with a dispute or a hatred that's been going on for centuries, since biblical times? What do we do? Where are we at as a global 21st century humankind population? What do we do? How do we get through this?
well, I think one thing that it's absolutely necessary is to stop the influx of Islamic immigrants into our country. I think that, I'm sorry if that's Islamophobic, then that's what it is. But these people, when they come in, they do not assimilate. And the whole American experience is about people coming from different cultures and assimilating into an American culture. And this is not happening with the Islamists. Their intention is to take over and to impose Sharia law or their idea of law on everybody else. Again, this is a non negotiable stance. People that believe like that really shouldn't be allowed into our country. I don't want them as American citizens.
That's a great point. And my grandfather, who came from Croatia, his lineage of ancestors were like enemies of the Serbians. But somewhere along the line, he decided as a young man he had had enough in Croatia, and he came to the States. And you mentioned something really good there, Dan. Assimilate. He came here to become an American. And there's been a really role reversal or intent over the last 50, 60 years of people that come to America not to assimilate, but to take or to change, and change in a negative way. When they're finding copies of Mein Kampf, Hitler's book for the final solution, written in Arabic in grade schools in Palestine, not Palestine or in Gaza, that's deep seated indoctrination of hatred.
Yeah.
My grandfather did not like the Serbians, but guess what? I don't know any Serbians, and if I did, I never had anything bad to say about them. So my dad, and then as the son of my dad, we changed. We changed. We took advantage of opportunities. Well, you were white. No, it was because we worked hard. Had nothing to do with skin color. My grandfather worked 37 years in a steel mill. And open foundry. Who does that? And he never really even spoke English, but he was proud as could be when he got his American citizenship.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not where I'm at because I'm white. I'm where I'm at because my ancestors before me made choices to better their lives. And if you don't want to better your life and you want to make those people around you miserable, like most of these Hamas individuals do, then I'm like you, Dan. We don't want you. We don't want more hate. We want people to come to America. And listen up, college students. We want people to come to America to not take away from it or make it any worse, because it's pretty darn good. We want you to improve it.
Make it better.
That's the legacy. Make it better. And I thank God every day for my grandfather. It must have been tough to leave all of your friends and family behind to come to America, a place where you don't speak the language, and to make something of yourself. So kudos to my granddad.
And kudos to every immigrant that comes over and doesn't speak the language. English is a very difficult language to learn. And I've had some experience with learning languages, so I speak from a position of experience anyway. And congratulations. I'm proud of you for learning the language and struggling with an incredibly difficult and complex language, and trying to become and meld into an American culture. I'm proud of the American culture. And the American culture is about individuality and it's about freedom. And these are the things that we value. And I am proud of that. And those are the type of immigrants that I want to see. I don't want to see immigrants that decide they should tear down our flag or put up the flag of some foreign nation instead of the American flag, like Newsom did in San Francisco. No American flags, just Chinese communist flags. That's Newsom. And Newsom really was impressed with Xi, you can tell.
Yeah, with G and the cranes. Remember, he was like gawking at a Chinese crane, which is a big bird. And I'm thinking to myself, is this guy really that goofy? We have cranes here in America. It's crazy. Yeah. That guy's something else. That's a whole other conversation. Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, it is. But nonetheless, I'm proud of the American culture. I think that, and I welcome any immigrant that wants to contribute to the American culture of individuality, freedom, personal rights, and the government working for the people and not the other way around.
Well put. It's well said, and I'm right along with you there. As an American citizen who is proud of that, and very humbled by the sacrifices and commitment by the people that came before us to sometimes give of their own lives so that our lives could be better. Our hearts and prayers go out to all of the families on both sides, the innocent victims, the hostages, all their friends and families that have been just devastated by this yet again another religious political war between two natural born enemies, it seems like. And we can't do this without you, the listeners. And so we appreciate y'all coming back to listen to another conversation, and make a comment, subscribe. But you don't have to agree with Dan or me. And we would like to hear your side as well. If you agree or disagree, leave us a comment on the YouTube channel. Anything to close out with, Dan?
No, John, it was a good discussion. Thanks for asking me.
We'll see you again on the next one.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Time of the Reason podcast show. Now it's time to think. Logic and reason work. It's only common sense. Do your part.